Hello, I'm Jason Lightoller from Woodside, and tonight I'm going to revisit how to make a reversible beanie hat.
This particular one has the main fabric in yellow
And a contrast yarn in grey fabric, and it creates the yellow contrast band at the bottom if you're using this side out. It's being made on a standard gauge knitting machine using 4-ply yarn. As this is a reversible hat, it is double thickness, which creates a very warm garment to wear, particularly for the cold winter months that are fast approaching in the UK. So the reason why I'm revisiting this project is because I had two people say to me they found the joining instructions for the crown difficult to follow. So what I've done is I've modified that for this project, and once again we're going to look how to make a reversible beanie hat. So the yarn that I'm using for this particular project is of the same weight, so I don't need to be concerned about using a different tension for the contrast and the main yarn. However, I have actually wound some scrap yarn onto a cone. Now, some people don't take the yarn off of a cone that they have wound themselves. I always leave it on. I actually find you get a lot more out of the yarn, particularly as it comes towards the end. I don't like yarn cakes. I find them messy. They jump around all over the place, particularly as it gets towards the end. If you are using your own yarn on a wound cone, you must ensure that it actually unwinds anti-clockwise like this, so it feeds into the machine evenly. As you can see, it's going anti-clockwise. Now I use an electric winder, and the winder actually does that automatically. It actually feeds anti-clockwise. If you're using a winder that doesn't do that, and you find that it actually unwinds in a clockwise direction like this, then you're going to run into problems, because as it actually feeds into the knitting machine, it will pull and jump about. So just to show you, it will do all of this and it won't feed in evenly. So all you need to do in that case is to turn the handle in the opposite direction. Normally that means anti-clockwise. So you might be wondering what this figure 1 means here. That just means that I've got one join in this particular cone, because most of the time you do end up with knots, and instead of actually having several different cones, I like to join mine together so I've got one continuous cone. And that means that I need to watch out for one join. Just to look at another one here, this means that I've got two joins in this particular cone, but I'm not going to be using that today. Now, to have a word about gauge. Gauge isn't particularly important for this particular project. All you need to be concerned about is using the same amount of weight for the contrast and the main yarn, and what we're going to be doing is focusing on the amount of rows that we're knitting, and I will be explaining that in a moment. Providing you're using a 4-ply yarn on a standard gauge machine, then you shouldn't really have any problems. So we're going to get on with that now. So what I've done here is I've cast on in some waste yarn over 150 needles, and I've done that 2 tensions tighter than what I'm going to use for my main yarn. And 150 needles is about the right size for an adult standard hat. There are some charts out there that you can use if you want to make a different size, but this is an average size hat. Now, I've done this waste yarn at 2 tensions tighter than my main colour, as I said, because it makes it a lot easier to pick the stitches up later, as you will see. So this main yarn is now going to be done at tension number 6. So the first colour that we're going to knit is the contrast colour, and what I'm going to do now is knit 100 rows. So I've knitted 100 rows, and now I'm switching to the main colour, and I'm going to knit 120 rows, which will take the row counter up to 220. So I'm at row 220. I have removed the claw weights from the bottom of the knitting, And now we need to cast off by a technique called sewing off. Sewing off was very popular in older knitting patterns, and it's still a very useful method to know. It's very simple, it's very quick, and essentially what you're doing is you are running a piece of yarn through all these live stitches to pull the area taut. And what you need to do is unthread your carriage and have a length of yarn the width of your knitting. You thread a ballpoint needle, sometimes known as a darning needle, and pull a few stitches forward. Then you put the needle in, and then you just hook the stitch off the needle like that. You can get 4 or 5 at a time comfortably on the needle, and then you just pull the length of yarn through the stitches, and you just carry on going. I'll just do a few more just to show you. Like that. You keep going ahead, and this is the way that I always use when I'm making beanie hats, just to get the stitches through the open loops at the top there. And that's it. So I'm going to do the rest off camera, and then I'll come back. So now we're going to sew off the live stitches at the cast on edge where we first started, and it's very easy. You have the purl side facing you and your waist knitting downwards. This is the ravel cord that I inserted. I've already done a few stitches here, as you've seen, and just to be safe, what I've done is I've put a clip on the free end there, so I'm not actually going to pull it all the way through. And again, I've threaded a ballpoint needle, and what I'm going to do is just insert the needle into the live stitch and go round there and pull it through. This is going to get caught up on my gate pegs, but yeah, it's the same principle. You just go round each stitch and you pull it through, because you want to catch each stitch onto the needle, so you've got the yarn going all the way through those live stitches. And I'm just going to do the rest of this off camera so I can come back and show you the next steps. So now what we're going to do is remove the waste yarn, and all we do for that is pull on the longer end of the ravel cord, and out it comes. And as you can see, there we are. And because we've got that yarn running through those stitches that we sewed off there, they will never ever run. So now I'm going to show you the next step. So what we're going to do now is to join the two side edges together to make a tube. And I've put both edges right sides together on the linker pins here, as you can see. And where the two colours change, they are joining exactly on these pins here. What I haven't done is I haven't caught the yarn that we're going to be using to pull the edges taut, i.e. the yarn that we used to sew off at the yellow or the grey ends there. That has not been caught up into the linker, because otherwise we won't be able to pull the ends taut together. So we'll just get this started up now, and it's up to you which method you use to join your side seam. I happen to use the linker. It's my preferred method for most of the joining of knitwear. However, if you take a look at the video that I have done, which compares 3 different types of machines, the choice is yours. So I've taken the hat off the linker and I've turned it inside out, as you can see, and we're going to now start the closure. So let me just zoom out so you can see it a little bit better. So what we're going to do essentially is to pull one end through the other. It doesn't particularly matter which end you pull through first. For this particular sake, I'm going to pull the grey end through to the yellow. So this is the opening of the yellow, and this is the bottom part of the grey. I'll just zoom out a bit more just to make it easier. This is the bottom part of the grey, and here is the yellow. So we've turned it inside out, so we've got a double fold here. So this is the end of yarn that we sewed off through the live stitches, and what I'm going to do is just to pull this taut. You need to be gentle, because if you go at it hammer and tongs, it can snap if you're not careful, and that is a disaster if it does that. So we'll just pull this taut, go round, and we will meet up there. And then what we're going to do is close this end off. So I'll just get this done and then I'll come back on camera. Right, okay, as you can see, I have pulled that taut. Here is the other end of where we sewed off, and I will re-emphasize that it is essential that you don't actually pull this taut, because this can slip out of your live stitches and then everything will run, and as I said before, disaster will strike. So it's just the same as if you were closing off any other beanie hat. So what I tend to do is just go acrosswards and then kind of close it off in a star shape. You can actually go all the way round and close it off with some running stitches. I actually find this is more effective, and it's actually much quicker, and you get a much more neater join. So from the top back to the bottom like that, and then go across, and then what I'm going to do is go diagonally to the quarter mark there, and then over to that quarter there. So imagine if the opening, if this circle was a clock face, like that. So you go from 12, 6, 9 and 3, and then what we're going to do is fill in the numbers that way. So we'll keep going and pull it fairly taut, not too taut that you'll break your yarn, of course. And now we'll just go over there. So that would be 10 o'clock. And we're going to bring that over to what would be 4. And pull that. And we'll bring that to 8 o'clock. And finally, to close up the last little bit, we'll go over to 2 o'clock. And then we'll tie off these bits here, these two ends, like that. Oops, sorry, I knocked the camera there, as you saw. We'll tie those off, and we will snip off, and they can stay like that. And now we're going to do the same with the yellow. So we'll just bring that up like that, but we don't want this to be lost. So we'll bring that up like that. Make sure that the loose joining threads are inside the hat there. Here is one end of where we did our sew off. I'm just going to snip that because that's very long. And I'm going to just make sure that I've got the other end. So if I pull the other end there, then there's guarantees that it won't go anywhere. So we've got both ends. So this is one end of the sew off, this is the other end of the sew off, and again we're going to just pull it gently all the way around, making sure that we keep this grey end out, and it's important why, and I'll show you in a moment. And we keep pulling it taut, as taut as we can go, and again we're going to thread up our ballpoint needle with the end of the yarn that we've just pulled taut. And it's the same principle. So here is our seam. I'll just get that like that. Here is our seam here, and what I'm going to do is just run a few running stitches just along here, just to catch it in, to make sure it's extra secure, like that. I'm going to get the other end of what we pulled up, and I'm going to make sure that that's in place. I'm going to catch that stitch there, just to make sure that that doesn't come undone, as we saw. Now, the crown of the grey yarn, as we're going to go to the top here, we're going to catch the crown of the grey part of the hat there. So in, just to where your stitches are, and then across the top, and then we're going to pull it taut. You don't need to go any further across, so we're not going to go back that way as we did the last time. We're going to go back through the crown, and we're going to catch that edge again. This time we're going to fold the edges of the hat in, still pulling the end tight, and we're going to catch that edge, so that would be the 9 o'clock, and we're going to go directly over to 3 o'clock, and then back over to 9 to secure it, and then we're going to fold that in at 2 o'clock, like that, and then we're going to catch that at 2 o'clock, fold that in at 8 o'clock, and catch that there. And then we're going to go back to 2 o'clock and catch that, and then just close it off like so. And there we have it. If you want to, you can go back from 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock and just give it another couple of stitches just to secure it off, like that. And then this loose end here, what I'm going to do is just snip a little bit of the end off there, and then pop it through there, and then bring it out like that. What you're not doing is going through to the grey side, it's in between the grey and the yellow, and then you snip it off, and then you'll find that it's buried. And now we can look at the finished hat. And here we have the finished hat with the main side out. And this is the hat with the contrast side out. You can of course use whatever combinations you want to use. You can use ferrule, you can use additional stripes. If you wanted a deeper contrast stripe there, then what you would do is increase the number of main rows and decrease the number of contrast yarn. This is an ideal way to use up scrap yarns, although you need to make sure that you've kept the contrast and the main yarn of the same weight.